This story was written by Sorry Draft 7183. I, 21 male, stumbled across here a couple weeks ago and have been reading lots of the posts. I thought I would share a story that happened about a year ago that has changed how I view living alone. At the time, I lived in my parents' house because the cost of living was so expensive. I was a university student working casual jobs and couldn't afford to move out. One day, my parents left to go on a business trip in France and decided to make a family vacation out of it. It was the middle of exam period, so I couldn't go, but they took my 4 siblings. I was ecstatic since I could have the whole house to myself. They left early Monday morning. I looked forward to being the man of the house for the upcoming week, and everything was great until around 7 p.m. the next night. I was driving back home on a long, dimly lit road leading towards my street. Suddenly, I spotted a bald, shirtless man walking along the street, carrying a shovel. Even though I saw him momentarily, his figure is etched in my brain. He was as pale as the moon, and his eyes were lifeless and empty. We live in a suburban area, far from any farmland. I couldn't imagine what someone would need a shovel for at this time of night. I kept driving. Checking no one had followed me, I drove into the garage and closed the door. Of course, no one followed me. I chuckled to myself as I went about making dinner. By the next day, I had convinced myself that he might have just been lost or had dementia or something. Having 3 looming exams around the corner helped me forget about the man. I studied at home that day, which meant I got to practice a new prelude for piano as I studied music theory. I studied hard, only to stop for food and the occasional YouTube video until I noticed the time. 7:34 p.m. Damn it, I muttered, as I realized I'd forgot to bring my washing in. It would have to go in the dryer now. I grabbed a basket and went outside, soaking in the soft night sounds of crickets and rustles in the leaves. Suddenly, I heard movement down my driveway. Moving quietly, I tentatively approached the end of the driveway, outlined by a perimeter of bushes. "Hey, who's there?" I asked nervously. No answer. As I waited near the bushes, I braced myself for a shovel to come towards my face. But there was only more rustle of leaves, then silence. I stood there for what felt like hours, waiting for someone to appear. But no one did. Returning to the clothesline, I grabbed the basket and went back inside, ensuring the door was locked behind me. It was now Wednesday, and I was more than just a bit nervous. I checked that every window and door were locked several times before leaving for university. I couldn't focus in class. I was still thinking about the man I saw on Monday night. When I arrived home, I took out a packet of 2-minute noodles and watched Breaking Bad. We live in a bigger house, which unfortunately means it creaks a lot more on its own when no one's making any noise. The house is equipped with a motion detecting system, but I don't trust its accuracy, so I did laps throughout the house whenever I heard a creak that was a bit too loud. Every time I walked past the windows outlooking our backyard, I expected to see that pale face pushed up against the window, looking inside. I wanted to call the police to just ask them to drive around my street and see if anyone was lurking, but I felt embarrassed for getting so worked up over no physical evidence. I decided against calling the police and shortly went to bed, accompanied by nothing but the howling wind outside. It was now Thursday, which meant another day of practicing at home. Having finished my practice around 8 p.m., I got up to make myself a sandwich. As I gathered the cheese, ham, and lettuce for my sandwich, I paused to remember what I needed for school tomorrow. And that's when I heard it. A singular, high-pitched piano note echoed throughout the house. The blood drained from my face as I looked down the stairs of our home. I froze in fear, unable to move a muscle. Slowly, I turned and saw the motion detector panel. It consisted of 6 lights, one for each room a sensor was in. I saw the lights for room 2, which was where I was, and room 6, which was where the piano was. They were flashing. All I could do was watch as the light for room 6 turned off, and subsequently, the light for room 5 began flashing. It was then when I could hear running down the hallway. Grabbing a knife from the bench, I ran for one of the bedrooms and lay underneath the bed. I could hear someone running up the stairs as I lay there. Walking around the kitchen table, they tapped their fingers on the bench. Holding my breath, I waited as he approached the bedroom I was hiding in. He entered the room, but all I could see were his legs. He stood there silently, peered into the closet, then turned and left. Now was my chance. I left the bedroom quietly, clutching at the knife. I crept down the stairs slowly. However, as I reached the bottom stair, a soft creak left the floorboards. I ran towards the front door, reaching for the keys that hung next to it. I could hear him coming as I tried to unlock the door. Once I flung the door open, I ran towards the end of the driveway, screaming for help. The police were shortly called, but couldn't find anyone in the house or in the nearby area. After giving the neighbors the description of the man I saw on Monday, I was told that the description sounded like someone who used to live a couple streets away. However, he had gone missing 6 months ago. For the rest of the week, police patrolled my street, but didn't find anything. But to this day, the image of the man walking down my street is permanently stuck in my head. I've since moved out into my own place, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't check the house carefully every time I come home late at night.
This happened when I went camping with a few friends. It got late and everyone fell asleep. I was the last one awake. I thought I was anyway. The campfire was still lit. I was yawning and half asleep in my sleeping bag. I heard the sound of someone stoking the fire, and then I asked, with not much thought, "What are you doing?" I stared in the direction of the stoking sounds and saw someone sat the other side of the fire. I couldn't see them clearly for the fire, but I could see a large, shadowy outline of a person. My field of vision was very hazy. "I'm just watching the fire," a voice replied. For some reason, I wasn't frightened. I should have been asking myself, who the hell was this, and what the hell were they doing at our campsite? We were in the middle of nowhere, deep in the woods, and it must have been about 3 in the morning. I don't know if that was down to me being half asleep. I felt like I was in a dreamlike state. You know, that perpetual place between consciousness and sleep. I kept speaking to the owner of that voice without any thought process being initiated in my mind. I thought I was asleep for a while. If the fire went out, what would you do? Don't put the fire out, I replied. Why? What would happen if the fire went out? It won't go out. Out here in the mountains, if this fire went out, you wouldn't be able to see a thing, would you? Well, if the fire goes out, I guess we'll just have to deal with whatever happens in the dark. No one knows what's lurking in the dark, do they? The darkness is as frightening as it is deep. We never know what's in the dark. That's why we have to keep the fire burning. We've got to take turns keeping the fire burning, keep watch. I don't know what else to call that thing, but I will call it the Lord of Voices. I don't know why that's even in my head. It kept asking me to extinguish the fire, and it kept telling me that it would be fine. You're already sleepy. Just put the fire out. You'll sleep so peacefully. I don't want to do that. I'm fine. Just don't worry. Shall I put the fire out? Don't do that. If you put the fire out, I'll just start the fire again. I don't like the dark. Once the fire's out, it's already dark. There's no use fighting it. You may as well sleep. It's okay, I have a lighter. I'll keep the fire burning. How are you sure it will work? You don't need that, just give it to me. If the fire doesn't go out, what use is the lighter to you? Just throw it away. It's not mine, you can't do that. This dreamlike state went on for hours in my mind, but in reality perhaps it was just minutes of some fleeting dream. Although deep down, I know it wasn't a dream. I don't know if I can convince you of that, but this was real. Eventually the shadow rose and began to amble away. It swayed as it moved into the darkness. Then I felt as if I was being shaken. It was horrible. And when I opened my eyes, I was eye to eye with one of my friends from the campsite. I was relieved it was him and not that shadow, the Lord of Voices. "What the hell are you talking about?" he asked. I could only mumble half responses. I was confused myself. I was so confused, but then my thoughts began to make sense. My friends had come out of their tents, and they had heard me muttering alone out there, and they had came to see what the issue was. It was the dead of night and near pitch black, except for the dying embers of the fire. I saw one of my friends was about to extinguish those remaining embers. I flew into an insane panic. I had to be restrained, but there was no way I was going to allow that fire to go out. I screamed at them to never let the fire go out. Then I remembered the Lord of Voices' words with a chill. No one knows what's lurking in the dark, do they? I stayed awake all night and watched the fire, shivering in fear of hearing that voice again. But it never came back. I can still hear it in my mind. What was I talking to? Something older than man? I get goosebumps when I think back to that night in the woods.
This story was written by Mintjump. The knocking was barely loud enough to pull me out of my sleep. With my eyes drooping from tiredness, I pulled out my phone and checked the time. 3:33 a.m. Who the hell was at my door at 3 in the morning? With my back still hurting from the unpacking at this new apartment, I got up and slowly walked to my door. The white-painted wooden door looked as if placed in the spotlight by the moonlight coming from the window. I swing open the door, and no one. Whoever decided to break my sleep in the night was already gone. Maybe a drunk neighbor knocked on the wrong door before realizing their mistake. Who knows? I closed the door and retired back to my cozy sleep. You can't blame me for not suspecting more. How could I have known the knocking would come back the next night? The knocking came back, breaking my sleep yet again. My eyes shot open, and I checked my phone in frustration. 3:33 a.m. I had had a terrible day, so naturally, I stomped furiously out of the bedroom toward my door. This is my second day in this bloody place, and you all can't even let me sleep. I swing open the door with a frown visible on my face. There was no one. Of course. I grunted, locked the door, and after mourning my interrupted sleep, decided to hit the bed again. The knocking continued for another 3 days, leaving me restless each night. It was the same thing at the same time each night. 3 knocks at 3:33 a.m. The constant commotion had robbed me of sleep, and my exhaustion festered into anger. I was going to find out who was doing this. So, I sat on my sofa all night, waiting for 3:33 a.m. By the time the clock hit it, I was struggling to keep my eyes open with all the willpower I had. As soon as the clock hit 3:33, I jumped up, ran to the door with all the anger that had piled up throughout the nights, and swung the door open yet again to an empty hallway. "Motherfucker lucked out today," I whispered. And then I heard it. But this time, the knocking didn't come from the main door. It came from behind me. My body grew cold, and my anger was replaced with a realization that made my spine shiver. Slowly and unwillingly, I turned around. The knocking had come from my bedroom door, which was shut closed. Was someone in my bedroom? Was I in danger? What should I do? Should I call the cops? All the adrenaline pumped by my anger had dried out while I contemplated what to do. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I asked loudly. When no answer came back, I slowly went and turned the doorknob of my bedroom. As the door squeakily opened, it revealed my bedroom, with someone in it. All my blood dried, and I stared at the person laying in my bed, unable to move a muscle, as if I were in sleep paralysis. The person was me. I watched my mangled body, with its blood-red eyes and mouth that were frozen in its scream. And then the door flew shut in my face, knocking me back on the living room floor. My eyes swelled up, and I curled into a little ball and cried for the remainder of the night, unable to process the fact that I just saw my very own dead body. I must have dozed off, because the next thing was me waking up the next night. With a dried mouth and tired eyes, I crawled my way to my phone in the living room and checked the time. I was a minute early. I waited for a minute until 3:33 a.m. hit. Even though I was curled up just in front of the main door, I couldn't muster the courage to open it. But then it flew open, showing me the empty hallway. I kept staring at the empty hallway, and after a while, noticed that the roof had a person stuck to it. And then, without warning, the figure dropped with a loud thud. I screamed and cried as I saw the person was my body. Laying on the floor, it looked at me with its dead eyes that bled tears of blood. "Please stop," I cried. It didn't stop, though. Every night, I pass out from exhaustion after crying, only to wake moments before the inevitable knock. I don't eat or drink anymore. What's the point? The knocks have shown me so many ways that I can die, each one worse than the last. I can't take this anymore. I want to escape, but the doors won't let me. I'm writing this at 3:30 a.m. Only 3 minutes until the knocking shows another death of me. I just wish this time it kills me for real. Because I'm scared. I'm scared that this is going to continue forever.